Hello, and thank you for watching. Through the years, I've had people from time to time ask me, Ken, what do you think about the Song of Degrees there in the book of Psalms? And anyway, I'm going to tell you what I think is going on with the Song of Degrees. The Song of Degrees, there's basically 15 of them. It starts out with Psalms 120, and each chapter heading starts out Song of Degrees, and it goes chapter by chapter all the way to Psalms 134. And when you think of degrees, you think of like what comes to your mind is like either education, like bachelor's, master's, or doctorate, or you think about the degrees in a compass or something like that. And a sundial degrees and a compass degrees are not the same thing. For example, if you come over to the book of Isaiah in chapter 38, we're reading in verse 8, "Behold, I will bring again the shadow of the degrees which is gone down in the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backward, so the sun returned 10 degrees by which degrees it was gone down." The degrees in a compass are like 360 degrees, but the degrees in the sundial are basically hourly. They go by hour. You don't tell time with 360 degrees. You do it usually hourly. I went online and I did research historically on sundials, and they're either built on the wall and they catch the shadow movement of the sun, or it's a device that's stuck in the ground that's catching the shadow movement of the sun. And a lot of times it's just a monument. Somebody's built a monument that also serves as a sundial. You can look at it and tell what the time is. So the degrees are dealing with basically hourly increments. It's not like the degrees on a compass, nothing like that at all. Back in the book of Genesis in chapter 1, it talks about the evening and the morning were the first day, and the evening and the morning were the second day, and the evening and the morning were the third day. So technically a calendar day begins at 6 p.m. in the evening. That's when it begins. So Song of Degrees in Psalms 120, those 15 degrees, if you add those 15 degrees to the beginning of the calendar day, okay, if you add 15 to 6 p.m. in the evening, you come up with 9 o'clock in the morning. And that's basically the third hour of the sunrise. After the sun comes up at 6 in the morning, that's the third hour. That just happens to be the same time that Jesus Christ was crucified. He was crucified on the third hour. The sun's come up. He's crucified on the third hour there. And he said, it got dark on the 6th hour. And then he said, it is finished on the 9th hour. Okay? So he gets crucified the third hour, it gets dark the 6th hour, and then he says, it is finished on the 9th hour. Well, so I know from that the Song of Degrees dealing with a sundial would have something to do with determining at what time Jesus Christ would get crucified. So he got crucified basically on that third hour in the morning, which happens to be 15 hours away from when the calendar date started. So he gets crucified on the third hour, it gets dark on the 6th hour, and he says it is finished on the 9th hour. Well, the daytime from sunrise to sunset runs 12 hours. Church history runs 2,000 years. If you divide 12 into 2,000, you get 166 point something something. If you multiply that 166 point something something times the 9th hour, you come up with 1500 AD, 1,500 years AD, which happens to be the beginning of the Philadelphia church. And we live in the church age today called Laodicea, which means rights of the laity. And the Philadelphia church means brotherly love. And Philadelphia was the only period in church history that Jesus Christ said kept his word. There was only one period in church history. There's 7 different churches in church history, and there's only one period that Jesus Christ said kept his word, and that was the Philadelphia church, which produced our King James Bible, which is the Word of God. And Laodicea is an apostate church. It means rights of the laity. We're in that today. That church ends with the rapture of the church. Revelation chapter 4 and verse 1 is the rapture. That's when we go out. And prior to Revelation 4:1, it has a listing of the 7 different church periods. And that's church history, because the word church occurs like 19 times in those first 3 chapters. But from Revelation 4:1 past Revelation 19, it doesn't occur not one time, because the church is not down here. The church has been raptured out. So that's where we get our church history there, right from the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation. We don't have to rely on historians or anything like that. We just stick with the book, and we got our church history. And prior to Philadelphia Church was the church of Sardis. Sardis means red ones. It was a time of great persecution. And by the way, Jesus Christ, he was crucified on the 3rd hour. It got dark on the 6th hour. And then he said, it is finished on the 9th hour. That's your church history right there. That's your timeline. Because from the 6th hour to the 9th hour, it got dark. And so when people talk about church age and different parts of the church age and periods, they talk about the dark ages prior to Philadelphia. And that's Sardis, the church of Sardis was in that period. And a lot of persecution in that period. If you want to read up on the persecution, there's a book out called Fox's Book of Martyrs, written by John Fox. And it's a good book to glean from. And he wrote that. He actually wrote that in the Philadelphia, right as the Philadelphia church period began. He actually wrote that book. But it was talking about Sardis and prior. Very interesting book. We studied that book many years ago. And it's easily available. You can get it online or in Christian bookstores all across the USA. It's a blessing to read. Anyway, that's what's up with Songs of Degrees. And there's 15 of them. If you add it to the beginning of the calendar date, you come up with the exact time that Jesus Christ was crucified. All right. Hope this has been a blessing to you. Thank you very much for watching.